All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started here. It's just a minute past 1 o'clock here. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining today's webinar. We'll be discussing the different SOC reports and the 5 trust service principles. This is a topic of conversation that we get quite a bit at different events and trade shows. Causes a lot of confusion, so we're really excited to go ahead and share some of this information that will hopefully clarify some of this for you. We're also really excited that we're have the opportunity and the ability to co-present this with one of our partners, DeSanto Priest & Company, which is a CPA firm located in Rhode Island. They do a lot of SOC work with us on our behalf and actually formulate the opinions and sign the attestation. So they have extensive knowledge in this area, which is outstanding, and we'll be able to share a great deal of insight into these different pieces of the SSA E16 process. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Everybody's line has been muted except for who will be presenting. If you have any questions, we're going to do a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, which should take about 20 to 30 minutes. You can go ahead on the bottom of your screen, there should be a little chat box. You can go ahead and address those to me. My name is Jeff Yeagley with Compass IT Compliance. You can also go ahead and put them and address those to everybody, and we'll get to those in the order in which they're received at the end of the webinar. So today we're going to have, as I mentioned, we're co-presenting this with DeSanto Priest & Company. We have 2 presenters that are on the line. From DeSanto Priest & Company, we have Mike Mellor, who is one of the partners and is also a certified public accountant. And we also have Keith Gosselin from Compass IT Compliance, who is one of our senior IT auditors that do quite a few of these engagements together, so they have a great working relationship. So without further ado, I'm going to quiet down. I'm going to turn it over to Mike to go ahead and start the presentation. And take it away, Mike.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. With that, why don't we just go ahead and dive right in. So our agenda today, which we will move through here fairly quickly. We're going to cover the different types of SOC reports and their related use. We're going to try and shed a little bit of light on not only the differences between the 3 different SOC reports, but also differences between the types of reports within each SOC, if you will. We're going to talk a little bit about the standards that the SOC reports, at least type 2 and 3, are applied against. These are referred to as the 5 trust principles. We'll give you a little bit of insight where you can go with further questions, and then I'd like to really kind of quickly open it up to Q&A as quickly as possible. So without further ado, oftentimes when we're approached with questions about SOC reporting, people are still making reference to an old auditing standard, Statement on Auditing Standards number 70. And I'd like to begin with giving a little bit of background, which I think will kind of put today's conversation in context. SAF 70 was first issued in 1992, so a good 20 plus years ago. And a lot has changed, not only in the accounting profession, but also in the business environment since that time. Most notably, the use of information technology, whether that be to process financial transactions or the like. And we've also seen the development of international business. And those 2 major changes in our business environment led to the accounting profession revising that standard. And they did a couple of things. They took it out of the audit promulgated literature, and they moved it into the attestation standard. And I don't offer those words lightly or to confuse anyone, but essentially there are some key differences between a report that's issued in an audit standard versus an attestation standard. But first, one of the key reasons that the standard was revised was to prevent the misuse of the standard. And what was happening was SAF 70 was principally designed to issue comfort for users of third-party organizations that were processing some element of financial reporting data that their clients would use that ultimately got audited. And they were trying to apply that standard to instances that really didn't apply. Just think about the whole advent and the increase in the software as a service model and cloud computing as really two good examples. And then we also, with the advent of business becoming, or our business environment becoming more global, each country had their own accounting standards, and we've seen a convergence of those standards into, or at least the process to try and converge those standards into one global set of standards. And the accounting industry in the United States was recognizing this, and they wanted to move forward and try and align this particular standard with where the international community was headed. Long story short, what we wound up with is a new standard called SSAE number 16. Another misconception here as we start to discuss the different types of SOC reports. SSAE 16 stands for Statement on Standards for Attestation Engagements, and it really only applies to SOC 1. SOC 2 and SOC 3, which we'll get into here more in a minute, are covered by attestation standard number 101. So just some kind of background history to kind of put all of this thing in context. SOC, not to be confused with SOX, which stands for Sarbanes-Oxley, stands for Service Organizational Controls. Another good way to kind of think about this and put it into context is, if you're an organization that outsources any element of your operations, whether they impact the financial reporting function of your organization or other elements, think cloud computing, or anything you're outsourcing down the supply chain, obviously it's a burden for you to manage compliance of those particular vendors to make sure that they're living up to the elements of your contracts with them, and to make sure they're not putting any of your customers' information in jeopardy. The AICPA's response to these changing standards, the changing business climate and the like, was to develop some reporting guidelines around the different types of reports that could be issued to help organizations. And what they came up with are these service organizational, or SOC reports, in this 3 different types. Jeff, why don't we go ahead and advance? So the first type is a SOC 1 report. This is SSAE 16. The purpose of the SOC 1 reports is to provide an organization with comfort that anything that they have outsourced to another organization that impacts their financial reporting function, that this is a way for them to gain comfort and assurance over the protection, the accuracy, the validity of that particular information. One or two, perhaps two good examples of how this is often used, and one that I think most people will recognize. If you're an organization that outsources your payroll function, obviously that payroll function and the payment of your employees is perhaps not material, but at least somewhat critical component of your overall operations. You want to make sure that that payroll is being processed timely, accurately, and there's protection over the personally identifiable information that you're transmitting to your payroll provider. That's an example because it impacts your financial reporting function. That's a SOC 1 example. Another example perhaps could be when you use an outside third party to administer your retirement benefits. If you have some type of defined contribution plan like a 401k plan, and you're outsourcing the administration of that plan to a third party, that third party is most likely an organization that you would look to want to obtain a SOC 1 report from. There's 2 types of SOC 1 reports. There's what we refer to as a Type 1 and a Type 2 report. We're going to get into that a little bit later. The organization of a SOC report, if you're not familiar with these, really comes in 4 parts, and we refer to those as sections. Section 1 of the report is the auditor's opinion. Section 2 of that report is the organization's assertion. Section 3 of that report is what we refer to as a system description, and by system I don't mean just IT, it's really people, process, and technology. And Section 4 is a component or a placeholder in the report for an organization to describe or list things that are not covered by the auditor's opinion. The auditor's opinion, which we just talked about, is covered in Section 1, can cover a number of different things, which we will tie back to our discussion here in a minute about a Type 1 versus a Type 2 report. And it could cover such things as fairness of description, the suitability of the design of the controls within that system description, and the overall operating effectiveness of the controls. SOC 2 reports, why don't we just, let's click through all that and let it all come up. SOC 2 reports cover things outside of the financial reporting function. The framework that is used to measure and what the auditor ultimately opines upon is an organization's design of controls, description of their system, again, people, process, and technology, relative to 5 things. These 5 things we refer to as the trust services principles, and they are security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. At the top of the discussion, I talked, as I was given a little bit of history about why the SAS 70 standard was revised into SSA 16, and then we came up with 2 additional types of reports. You can see, just thinking about a cloud computing or a SaaS, software as a service model here, when you think about those 5 trust principles, they are very relevant and salient to a cloud computing or a SaaS model. Again, much like a SOC 1 report, we have 2 types of SOC 2 reports, a Type 1 and a Type 2 report. We're going to get to a little bit more detail on those in a second. All right. Again, 4 parts to a SOC 2 report. Section 1, the auditor's opinion. Section 2, the assertion by the service organization. Section 3 is the systems description, and Section 4, again, is a placeholder for information to be presented that's useful to a user that's not covered by the auditor's opinion. The auditor's opinion can cover, again, such things as fairness of description, the design, the design of the controls relevant to any one of the 5 trust principles. Not all 5 are applicable. It really depends on the nature and scope of the service organization and how organizations are using their services, and then ultimately operating effectiveness. A SOC 3 report, let me give a little bit more background information. Either a SOC 1 report or a SOC 2 report is not what we call a general use report. And by that I mean the distribution of that report is limited. It's limited to the organization, management within the organization, the board of directors, and obviously that organization's customers and its auditors. Outside of those parties, the report should not be shared. So it's really not to be used as a marketing document, but we get questions all the time. Well, I'm getting questions from not only customers, but potential customers. Can I share that report? Well, the AICPA was quite well aware of, quite frankly, the business need for organizations to be able to share a report like this with prospective potential customers to lend some credibility and perhaps provide a business advantage to them. And that's why they came up with a SOC 3 report. A SOC 3 report is a report that distribution is not limited, so it can be used much more in a marketing type fashion. It essentially is a SOC 2 report without Section 4. And by that I mean it has to be a SOC 2 Type 2 report. You can't do a SOC 3 report on a Type 1 SOC 2, if you will. And I know this is probably getting confusing, and hopefully when we get to Q&A, there'll be an opportunity to ask some questions. Again, it's relevant to those 5 trust principles. The main key element here is SOC 3 report can be widely distributed and used much more in a marketing function. So just a side-by-side comparison of the 3 different types of reports, who the users are, why and what. Again, just want to draw some clarification to SOC 1. SOC 1 is SSA 16. And if you're an organization, either a user or a service organization, where you're processing data that impacts either your or someone else's financial information that is a part or is used in part of a financial reporting cycle, SOC 1 is applicable. SOC 2 and SOC 3 are reports that render some element of an opinion over an organization's compliance with one or more of the 5 trust principles that we discussed earlier. Okay, what's the difference between a Type 1 and a Type 2? I like to think of these as big boy and little boy, if you will, for a second. Type 1 and Type 2 reports are applicable to both SOC 1 and SOC 2. The main and key difference between them basically are as follows. A Type 1 report is rendered as of a point in time. So most everybody on the call today probably has a PDA or a smartphone that is capable of taking a picture. Think of a Type 1 report as a snapshot in time, a picture. A Type 1 report, the period, it does not cover a period, it covers a particular point in time. For accountants, think of a balance sheet type item. A Type 2 report covers a period of time. That period of time can be 6 months, no less than 6 months, and no greater than 12 months. In terms of the types of opinions that are relevant and why I call these big boy and little boy, a Type 1 report speaks to 2 elements. It speaks to the fairness of the description, which is contained in Section 3 of the report. Again, that systems document, don't think just IT, think people, process, and technology. And fairness of description, an easy way to describe that would be how accurately does Section 3 of the report represent either, if you're a service organization, your system, again, people, process, and technology, over your particular system or service provide. It also covers the suitability of the design of controls. And those would be the controls that are in place that help an organization comply with one or more of those 5 trust principles. A Type 2 report, again, covers a period in time. Again, no less than 6 months, no greater than 12 months. It covers both the fairness of description and the suitability of the design of the controls that are in place to ensure compliance with one or more of those trust principles. But it also goes a step further, and this is why I call it the big boy report, because it actually speaks to the operating effectiveness of the controls that are contained and described in that systems document. Again, Section 3 of that report. So let's talk a little bit about, at least at a high level, what these five trust principles are all about. The first one, and they're in no particular order, but security. Security is really just what you think about when you hear that term. It could be described as the system. Again, people, process, and technology, not just IT. The system is protected both physically and logically against unauthorized access. Availability. The system is available for operation and use as agreed to. Processing integrity. The system is processing information completely, accurately, timely, and that information is authorized. Confidentiality. Somewhat similar to security, but also very different. The information is protected as you committed or agreed to in your contracts with your customers or in perhaps SLAs. SLAs, when you think about those, availability, most often is a trust principle that gets scoped into an engagement. And then lastly, privacy. One thing that I'd like to mention here, much like what occurred in the change from the SAS 70 standard to SSA 16, and then SOC 2 and SOC 3 under the AT 101 standard, is that our environment is dynamic and it is changing. And in response to that, the AICPA, which is the organization, the trade association for accountants, if you will, in the US, also global now, is monitoring changes in the business climate and environment and concerns. And obviously this being Cybersecurity Month, and we're all watching the election, and we're hearing daily about hacks and the like. Cybersecurity is something that is a deep concern for management and board and all of us, quite frankly. So in response to this, the AICPA has done a couple of things. One, they are in the process of changing these 5 trust principles. The reason they're doing that is to make sure that they remain relevant and salient to organizations as well as practitioners. And they're also looking to make sure that they can be used as broadly as they were originally intended to. So the AICPA put out what they call an exposure draft. Basically, they drafted what they think are going to be the changes to these 5 trust principles. They issued them to the public. They did so in September, and they're allowing for the public to comment on those proposed changes. You can comment up through December, and then the new standards should be issued in sometime in 2017. At the same time that the AICPA is doing that, they are also recognizing that based on not just particular industries, but I'll make reference to the healthcare industry. And when you think about some of the concerns there with, their use of personally identifiable information and protected health information, PHI, and all the different federal and state regulatory requirements, HIPAA, for instance, an organization called HITRUST issued what they call a common security framework that works very closely and is somewhat aligned to the 5 trust principles. Where the AICPA saw that, they recognized that there's a broader issue at play, not just in the healthcare industry, and trying to meet the demands of the business community, they have developed a cybersecurity framework. Again, this was issued in exposure draft. It's available for public comment, and we would expect that framework to be issued final sometime in 2017 with guidance both for service or all organizations, quite frankly, as well as practitioners in the latter half of 17, with reports most likely be able to be released in sometime in the 2018 timeframe. And again, very much in response to changes in the business climate, changes in things that we're seeing and hearing about in the news on a daily basis, and to help management and boards of directors gain some comfort there. So I offer that as something to be looking for, and to explain that the 5 trust principles are out there now. They can be used in their current fashion, but they are being changed. And there's a link on this page here that you could use, as well as to the 2 organizations conducting the webinar today, where you could reach out and ask any available questions. So with that, why don't we go ahead and open it up for questions?
All right, Mike, great job. Appreciate it. Thanks for taking some time to go through this. I know it's a somewhat confusing topic, at least on the surface, but it's an important one as well. So we have a couple questions here that I want to kind of share with you, and I think that these will probably be pretty easy for you, which is good, but it just speaks to the volume in terms of the questions folks have. So you referenced the Section 3 of the different SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports. Can you talk a little bit about the Section 3? Who's responsible for writing that? What should that contain? You know, those types of pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question, and Jeff, you know that's one that we get all the time. Section 3 again is referred to as the systems document, and again, I can't emphasize it enough. It's not just IT. It's really much more broad than that. It's people, process, and technology. So let's use my payroll example again, and we'll use a public company, ADP. So ADP has a process in place that they use. That process includes people, it includes process, and it includes the use of software tools to process payroll transactions on behalf of their clients. So think about that process, how they go about conducting the processing of payroll transactions for their customers. Think about it in a linear type basis, i.e. they have to receive information from a third party. That information comes in, they manipulate it and do certain things to it, and then turn it back around for their clients in the form of, you know, live paychecks for their customers' employees, or direct deposits into their bank accounts, as well as reporting not only for their clients, but also for various federal and state agencies with regards to payroll withholding. So Section 3, the systems document, would talk in fairly great detail about how ADP goes about conducting their business. Again, think of that process in a linear type fashion. How is the information coming in? Obviously, there's probably various ways that they could receive information. Most likely, you know, in today's day and age, they would be receiving it electronically. But how? How is that information secured? So with ADP as an example, that would be a SOC 1 report, because the payroll would be used by organizations as a component of their financial reporting function. So you would want to think about the controls ADP would need to have in place to ensure that that information that they're turning back around to their clients is accurate, it's issued timely, it's reconciled, and a number of different things. So there's no one kind of standard systems document that can be shared. It's very much needs to be customized and representative of the particular functions, again, people, process, and technology of an organization. So the organization ultimately is the one responsible for the development of the Section 3. We realize, you know, as auditors that most organizations, one, are challenged from a time perspective to be able to develop a Section 3 document, and they also most likely need some additional, perhaps technical support to write that. And that's why we've partnered with an organization like Compass, because as an auditor, I cannot necessarily assist an organization in the writing of Section 3 if I'm ultimately going to be rendering an opinion on the fairness of that description or other elements, the design of those controls, or ultimately the operating effectiveness. I think I answered the question, but I'm happy to take another shot at it.
No, I think that's great. That's perfect. That's a great answer, Mike. And I know that that's always one that we get quite a bit, as you identified, in terms of who can assist in that. And you're right. That's kind of, I think it would be really a conflict of interest for you to assist in that process and then go ahead and issue an opinion on it. So that makes good sense. Another question that we have here, and this is a good one too. We talked about, you went through those 5 trust service principles. How do you know which ones are in scope? How do you identify those in the SOC 2 report? Is that something that's contained in the Section 3, or how does that process kind of play out, if you will?
That's another great question. That's one that we get often. So not all 5 of those trusts, there's not a mandate that if you're going to issue, again, now when we talk about the 5 trust principles, we're talking about a SOC 2 or a SOC 3 report. Not all of those trust principles, all 5, need to be scoped into a particular engagement. Any combination or any number of those can be scoped in or applicable. And the manner in which, or how an organization determines the applicability and which one or combination of those trust principles get scoped in is really dependent upon the nature of a service organization's business. And by that I mean, I'll go back to our payroll example again. Well, let's choose another one. Let's choose a software as a service model. So if you've got an organization that has provided a solution and that solution is being delivered SaaS via the cloud, go and drill down to the types of contracts that organization has with its customers. And what is it that they are promising or committing to in their contracts, including their SLAs. So dependent upon that information and the nature of their operations, that's what drives which one or combination of those trust principles gets included in either a SOC 2 or a SOC 3 report. So we talked a little bit earlier, think about an SLA. If there is an organization has a software tool that they're delivering in a SaaS model, and it is critically important to their customers, i.e. their customers need to have 24/7 access to that tool, otherwise their organization is going to be harmed in some way, well, then, it would stand to reason that the availability trust principle is going to get scoped in, because that service or that tool needs to be available to their customers, and they have committed to it in an SLA. Think about a healthcare organization that is processing a lot of protected health information, confidentiality, security, and perhaps processing integrity are going to be critically important. But again, an organization really needs to take a good look at the nature of their operations and then drill down into their contracts and commitments with their customers and use that as a comprehensive way to determine which one or combination of the trust principles are in scope.
Awesome. Perfect. That's good stuff. I'll open it up. Anybody have any additional questions that they want to ask? Go ahead and pop it in that chat box now, or forever hold your peace. No, I'm just kidding. We can answer those at a later point in time if you have any. But Mike, it looks like those are the questions that we have that have come through. So actually, we might have one that's coming through right now. So give me 1 second here. Kevin, if you want to just put it in that chat box in there, that would be outstanding, and we can get that answered. Or if you want to unmute your line, you can go ahead and do that and ask live. That works too, whatever's easiest for you.
Yeah, sorry, the chat box doesn't seem to be working on my machine. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could talk for a second how like a SOC 2 type report to third parties integrates with reports on cybersecurity obligations like NIST and other reports of the same nature.
That's a great question, and that is really why the AICPA has just issued that exposure draft on cybersecurity, because, as you know, the NIST framework, which is a framework that the federal government issued relative to cybersecurity, there is that one out there. We've got ISO standards. We've got the High Trust Alliance standards. Needless to say, there's a proliferation of different standards and frameworks out there. What the AICPA is trying to do to address this growing business need is to draw from all of those different, and really, I don't want to say disparate, but somewhat complementary frameworks, and develop one holistic, comprehensive framework that can be used by organizations and practitioners to issue reports to lend comfort to users of an organization and banking organizations and the like. Think the entire supply chain relative to cybersecurity. So the trust principles are just yet another one of those frameworks that this new cybersecurity framework is going to draw upon. So what do we do in the interim while we're waiting on this new framework to be issued? What I'm seeing a lot of organizations do is rely on the SOC 2 report and then get very robust in Section 3 relative to their description around security and confidentiality, and speak to that. And then the auditor's opinion can render either comfort relative to the design of those controls or design as well as operating effectiveness.
Excellent. Kevin, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yeah, you know, that's kind of what I'm seeing is that Type 2 or SOC 2 report in and of itself doesn't really address the breadth of what some of these other reporting requirements are looking for. So,
well, that's exactly right, because the way SOC 2 reports are principally being used now is to render comfort over a particular system or some element of an organization. But when you think about cybersecurity, cybersecurity is really an entity-wide issue. It's not confined to any one system, business unit, or element of an organization. The new cybersecurity framework, by drawing upon all these different and disparate frameworks, is going to try and create a holistic standard. And the manner in which they're trying to do that, again, not to get overly technical, but up until the early 90s, there really wasn't a comprehensive framework for organizations to develop and measure compliance relative to internal control, not necessarily just internal control over financial reporting, but internal control relative to regulatory or legal requirements as well. So there was an organization, the Committee on Sponsoring Organizations, referred to as COSO, was an organization that was put together by the Treadway Commission, and they developed a framework, multi-principled, and the new cybersecurity framework is going to reference that COSO framework. It's going to draw upon it, and the idea there being is that the new cybersecurity framework will be able to look at an organization holistically, entity-wide, and render comfort there, not just relative to one system.
Excellent. Good stuff. I think that's a pretty good answer for sure. And I think, Kevin, I think that answers your question, which is good. Any other questions that anybody has? In case that chat feature is not working, you can go ahead and raise your hand by hitting the little raise hand button. But I think, as it stands right now, I think that's all the questions that we have here. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their busy day to go ahead and attend our fourth webinar of the month for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes on the back side of the webinar. I've put the contact information on the screen here for both Keith and Mike. I'm going to send out an email to everybody later today that's going to have a copy of the presentation for their records, as well as the contact information, of course, and also a link to the recording of this webinar. Hopefully we told Mike that we were recording this, otherwise, surprise, there it is. So that way you can go ahead and take a peek on it. You can find that on our website and also on our YouTube channel in case you have any questions about any of the information that was covered. So without further ado, I'm going to bring this one to a close. Again, thank you everybody for taking time to attend today. Thank you, Mike, for taking time to present, and thank you, Keith, for being here as well. Appreciate it, and hope everybody has a great rest of their Thursday. Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jeff. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.